Joining me now to talk about the latest on Russia's invasion of Ukraine is U.S. Representative Glenn Grothman, who's a member of the House Budget Committee, the Committee on Oversight and Reform, and the Committee on Education and Labor. He represents the 6th Congressional District of Wisconsin. Congressman, welcome to Washington Watch.
Well, glad to be on the show and look forward to talking about the Global Magnitsky Act. It was something that they snuck in there on the Suspending Energy from Russia Act last week, and it's something all your listeners should know about.
Yeah, I do intend to get there very quickly. Just what's your high-level assessment of what we're seeing in Ukraine right now?
Well, I think the important thing is people have to realize that eventually this has to end. And we want it to end without that many more people dying. I know there are negotiations going on right now, and I hope the Obama administration is encouraging those negotiations, and with both sides have to give something. First of all, we're tired. It's horrible, the number of Ukrainian, both soldiers and civilians who have died. It's horrible. When the Russian soldiers have died, I don't even know if they know why they're there. It's obviously a huge catastrophe for the economic situation around the world. And if the thing drags in long enough, Russia may wind up bringing the United States in this thing. So if there's one thing I'd like to add, I don't feel right now the Biden administration is doing enough to encourage this thing to wrap up.
And I do want to talk about that. You mentioned in these negotiations that are ongoing, and we, of course, all hope that this can be resolved as quickly as possible. You talk about the importance of everyone on both sides giving something up. Now, obviously, Russia is the aggressor in this situation. If Ukraine were to concede just for peace, is there any sense in which we would be negotiating with terrorists and rewarding Russia's aggression?
Well, I think everybody who I've talked to believes that when this thing wraps up, you know, Russia has conquered a given amount of territory. If you're going to say we are going to demand Russia get nothing in this, you may wind up continuing the fight for another 8 or 9 years. I think this is a catastrophe for the Ukraine. I think both in Ukraine and Russia, you have countries that have very small birth rates, a lot of only children, making it especially a horrible thing when these people die. And to hold out, which I believe that the Ukrainians themselves aren't even holding out for something like that, or at least if news reports can be believed, you're just going to wind up having a lot more people die.
And obviously, everyone does want to avoid that situation.
Easy for somebody in the United States sitting back to do, but you know, it's not our sons and daughters who are dying, right?
Well, it's terrible for everyone, and of course, we do want to keep this minimize the violence that's happening here. And I would say most of the people we have talked to in Congress for sure are not in favor of sending troops on the ground there. And there's this hope that this can be de-escalated rather than escalated. But there are competing thoughts about what Vladimir Putin is trying to accomplish right now. And there are some who think that the military progress that he has made has been disappointing and that he's looking for an off-ramp. There's others who think that he's trying to escalate this. What's your take on that?
Well, I mean, to me, with common sense, when he invaded, he was primarily concerned about Ukraine getting involved in NATO. I don't know if he was concerned about something else, but, you know, Ukraine had never been part of NATO. And I think that was his concern that if it was part of NATO, American troops would be brought in and be on another border with the Soviet Union, in addition to the Baltic states. Obviously, that is something that I think he may demand for pulling his troops back out. But like I said, every day more people are dying. We don't want to have more people die. And quite frankly, the more people die, the harder it is for either leader to negotiate a settlement down the road. And the more likely you have not American troops involved in there, but maybe Russia decides to go after the American economy, maybe going after our grid, maybe going after satellites that so much of our gadgets are dependent upon. Whatever it is, it would be good if this war ended before that sort of thing happened. And I'm not sure everybody realizes that.
Now, I want to switch topics a bit, and you tease this a little bit because there are political developments, of course, in the United States playing out as we monitor this international crisis. The aid package that the Congress has passed, or I'm sorry, not the aid package, but the Suspension of Energy Imports from Russia Act, contained some language that got slipped in there. Tell us about what your concerns with that are.
Should be of great concern to all of your Christian listeners. What was put in that bill was they updated something called the Global Magnitsky Act. And that was an act that passed about 10 years ago that said the US government could go after people who are violating human rights, take their property in the United States, deny them a visa to get in the United States. But they dramatically changed the law. Right now, that law, it defines what a human rights abuse is. Is it murder? Is it kidnapping? That sort of thing. Bad stuff. They're changing the law to be open-ended, just saying serious human rights abuses. Okay, now what is a serious human rights abuse to the Obama administration? It means we can go after people in foreign countries who are responsible for keeping abortion illegal. It means we can go after people who are maybe not in favor of pushing the LGBT agenda to school children. Do we in the United States want to be able to use our tremendous wealth that we've been given to weigh in on people who in other countries are opposed to abortion? The Bishop of the Dominican Republic has claimed that legislators in the Dominican Republic have been threatened by the United States. If they make abortion, if they don't make abortion illegal, that they could take their visas, which is one of the things that's available under this act.
Congressman Grothman?
It would be horrible if the United States wound up telling African or Latin American countries or countries in Eastern Europe that we're going to use our financial weight to force you to adapt an LGBT agenda or a pro-abortion agenda.
We're speaking to Congressman Glenn Grothman. And Congressman, was there any debate on the floor that would allow us to understand what the intention was behind this significant change in definitions?
There was debate. Unfortunately, not a lot of people voted no, because it was the bill designed to cut off purchasing of Russian energy, and the Republicans were going to lose anyway, no matter what happened. But it was brought up at the time. I don't think it received enough attention because it was one of these things that was added to this bill at the last minute. You know,
did the proponents of the new language, did the proponents of the new language have a chance to explain why they wanted this change?
No. It was just put in there. You got to remember, there was a compromise reached out between Republicans and Democrats on the bill, and then the Biden administration weighed in on this thing. And when you look what the Biden administration, when they talk about human rights, what do they talk about? Two things: abortions, LGBTQ, right? And they could have left it where it is now, you know, kidnapping, murder, serious crimes. They didn't leave it that way. We know why they didn't leave it that way, right? And already foreign countries have complained in the past, both in the Obama administration and Biden administration, countries, the United States kind of opposed to their Christian heritage. And we don't want the United States to be fighting other countries' Christian heritage. Do we, Joseph?
Well, we agree with that. And we do know that the Biden administration has been willing to use the weight of the federal government to punish people who are simply, who have different convictions about some significant issues. Now, final question. An ABC poll found that 70% of Americans disapprove of Biden's handling of gas prices and 70% disapprove of his handling of inflation. The Biden administration is trying to push back on this. Here's what President Biden had to say at the Democratic Caucus Issues Conference in Philadelphia.
From the moment he put his over 150,000 troops on the Ukrainian border, the price of gasoline in January went up 75 cents. And Putin began amassing troops along the border, and guess what? The world took notice. And those of you who work in the business know that the market anticipated. Prices went up more. And then Putin invaded. Make no mistake, inflation is largely the fault of Putin.
Congressman Grothman, is inflation Putin's fault?
That's absurd. People have been saying inflation would go through the roof for the last year and a half, and it was going through the roof. That's what happens when you keep printing money on the printing press when the Federal Reserve is financing all this new spending. The price of gas was up dramatically already a month ago. The price of metals, the price of food, the price of cars, the price of housing, everything was up a month ago, Joe Biden. And the reason it's up is the Federal Reserve keeps printing money that we don't have. You should have learned that in middle school, Joe.
In about 30 seconds, do you think the price of fuel already accounts for the action that we're seeing in Russia and the boycott of Russian energy? Or do you expect prices to continue to rise?
It'll rise, but I want to emphasize to your listeners, it's just not fuel that's going up. It's the cost of housing, it's the cost of food, anything with metals in it. They were going up beforehand. I have a lot of manufacturing in my district. I talk to people, it's not unusual to have a 300 or 400% increase in the cost of some metals that goes into things that we manufacture here in the United States. If that metal is going up for 300 or 400%, I'll tell you inflation is going to go up a lot more than 8 or 9%. And
Congressman Glenn Grothman, thank you so much.